You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. And now, here's two guys who don't even know what the word tariff means, Evan and Joe.
I'm Joe Ticotsky down in New Haven, Connecticut.
I'm Evan McFarlane here in St. Andrews, New Brunswick.
And you're watching episode 80 of Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. We got a lot to get to, so let's go right to the main story. And this can make us look good or bad because this is being taped a few days before the Super Bowl. Evan, who do you got winning the Super Bowl?
Well, who do I have, or who did I want to win? I mean, I've kind of given up on the Pats this year, and I really pulled for the Lions. So if whoever I say right here is going to lose, I think the Eagles flip the switch. They kick a field goal to win 31-28.
Wow. I bet
you it's going to be on a weird call too. Like it's going to be like the NFL's way of saving face.
Okay. I don't have a score prediction, but I'll just have one word on my prediction. Bundle-rooski. I'm going with the Chiefs. All right, on to you could see my shirt here from my coaching days up there. I want to give a early tip of the cap to Evan and his SJDA boys team. As we're taping this, they're about to start the playoffs. So when this airs, their season will be over. But congrats on what's been a pretty impressive season, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's a building year, and it's a building year for both teams. I also want to shout out the girls are going to regionals as well this year after a big win against Graham and Ann last week. And it's nice. The vibe in the gym's good. Both teams have been working really hard all year, and it's nice to see their work paying off. So best of luck to my team and the girls team this weekend.
Who'da thunk? St. Andrews, a basketball town. I love it.
Okay.
I just want to give a quick shout out to the RNS girls team who made their third annual trip down here to Connecticut. They hit a Yukon women's game, and I gave them a little quick tour of the Yale campus, and we got the thin crust pizza, of course. So it was a good 3-day trip by them. So, all right, we got to move on. So after the break, we will have part 2 of our interview with ESPN's lead college announcer for basketball, Canada's own Dan Shulman. You're watching Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews. Welcome back to Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV. On our last episode, Toronto Blue Jays TV play-by-play announcer and ESPN College Basketball play-by-play man Dan Shulman was on the show and talked about his baseball announcing career, his son Ben, who is now also an announcer, and his crazy story about missing Joe Carter's historic World Series walk-off home run. And now on part 2 of his interview, the Toronto-born Shulman will focus on his current work at ESPN doing college basketball, including his favorite on-campus arenas and who he thinks may just win this year's NCAA title. So let's welcome back Canada's own Dan Shulman. Dan, thanks for doing a part 2 of our interview, and this time we'll be focused on hoops. You currently work with Jay Billis as lead announcers on ESPN's college basketball. How long have you been paired with him, and what do you like about announcing with him?
Well, I've done games on and off with Jay almost since I started. This is my 30th year, and I think he started 1 year after me, if I'm not mistaken. But we've been regular partners probably for the last 7 or 8 years now. Prior to that, I worked with Dick Vitale primarily for about 15 years. And then if you go way back, I worked with all kinds of people, Bill Raftery and Len Elmore and Doris Berg and a ton of different people. But Jay's great, incredibly insightful and intelligent and thorough and well-prepared and connected. I mean, he's really got every attribute you would want in an analyst, and he's bald like me too, so he doesn't get to make fun of my hairline or anything like that. So he's actually got every attribute that I would like in an analyst, but he's not quite as bald as me. If he heard this, he might get a little upset at that. If I'm 10 out of 10 bald, he's about an 8.5, but he's great. I do about 35 games a year, and probably 31 or 32 of them are with Jay. He knows my tendencies and rhythm, and I know his, and that helps. It's like a shortstop and a second baseman turning a double play. I know where he likes the ball, where he likes to throw, that kind of thing. So we have a great time together. We have a great crew, great producer, director, and some other people who are working with us game after game. And I just feel lucky. I can't believe, again, that some Canadian kid who didn't even go to school for journalism, never mind got a chance to get into broadcasting, but has been able to do college basketball in the U.S. for all these years, because I just love it, and love it as much now as I did 30 years ago.
Now, as part of that job, what are some of your favorite on-campus arenas to call games at?
Number one is Kansas, without question.
Mm-hmm.
I will always say that, whether if I'm on a radio show at Kansas, I say that. If I'm on a radio show at Duke, I say Kansas. Duke would be number two. It is incredible. And then I would have like a third tier. Indiana, when Indiana is good, and they haven't been really good for a while, but when Indiana's good, it's unbelievable there. Purdue is amazing. Kentucky is great. North Carolina's really good. It kind of gets a bit of a bad rap, but it's really good. Gonzaga is excellent, unbelievably loud. Auburn is fantastic right now. So, but I would say Kansas 1, Duke 2, and if I had to pick one alone for the bronze medal, I'd probably pick Purdue.
Now you're forgetting a little place in Storrs, Connecticut. Come on, man.
Yeah, you're right. Now, I haven't been there. Okay, in my own defense, I haven't been there in at least 12, 14 years.
Okay.
ESPN no longer has the contract with the Big East.
Yeah.
Back when I started in the 90s and all through the early 2000s, I was in Storrs a lot, and in Rutgers and Seton Hall and Providence and St. John's and places like that a lot. I've been in any of those places in at least a dozen years. We don't have the contract. I can get a Connecticut game like they were in Maui at the Maui Invitational this year. So I can
No, don't mention Maui. Don't mention Maui.
Or Connecticut was at Texas this year. I can do ESPN has Connecticut at Texas because Texas is in the SEC now. They were in the Big 12 before, but either way, those are ESPN leagues. The Big East is not. So when they go to Connecticut, when they go to Storrs, I can't get them. So I'm sure it's incredible. I mean, I remember it being incredible. It's just been so long that I've been there that it kind of slips my mind.
Good friend of mine actually met you at the shoot around before the Texas game. He lives in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
So a friend of his who was a donor was down at the little shoot around. And
nice.
Not to hijack the interview, but the one time I went to Indiana for a UConn-Indiana game, met John Mellencamp outside the bathroom.
Big fan. He's a big fan. Yeah. That place is great. There, you can feel the tradition there. I really hope there are certain schools that haven't been as good recently as historically they have been, and Indiana is one of those. College basketball is better when Indiana is really good, among others, like Syracuse too, another when Syracuse is really good. And maybe that's just me kind of growing up with the sport in the 80s and remembering who was great in the 80s. But I hope Indiana, among others, and Syracuse, among others, that they get back to being prominent again.
Okay.
Yeah, like maybe give us some behind the scene info. I mean, you have all this insight on fun buildings and stuff that you like to be in, but how early do you typically get into a city when you're announcing a game on a weeknight?
So let's say it's Tuesday night, 7 p.m. game, just for example.
Yep.
I will fly in Monday, almost always. Occasionally Sunday. Like if the game's at Arizona, I might actually get in Sunday. But generally, let's say day before, and I try to get there early enough. So let's just call it Duke at North Carolina. So Monday afternoon, I will go see the North Carolina practice. The home team generally practices in the afternoons. So Duke at Carolina is a bad example because Duke does not come over to Carolina to do their game day shoot around. They do it at their own building because they're 8 miles away. So let's say it's Clemson at North Carolina. So I'll see North Carolina practice on Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday morning or early afternoon, the visiting team, Clemson or whomever, will do their game day walkthrough or shoot around, and then North Carolina will do one as well. So the typical thing is get in the day before, see the home team twice, see the visiting team once before the game. It can be different. Like on Saturdays sometime, my Florida-Kentucky game that I just did 3 days ago, as we are speaking in early January right now. So my Florida-Kentucky game was at 11 in the morning at Rupp Arena in Lexington. So I had to get in as early as I could Friday to see the teams. There wasn't really much availability, obviously, Saturday. Sometimes you can just go in and see the coach. The coach will see us for 10 minutes if the team's not doing a formal thing that morning. So it's always a little bit different, but generally get in day before, see as much of the two teams as you can, and be on the first flight out the next morning.
And like the travel, it's got to wear on you. I mean, I know, especially in the wintertime, like I have a hard time just going to the grocery store to grab something.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
gotta
it's
be
not.
fair.
Yeah, and I'm totally used to it, and it's it's just part of the job. So, but you're going to a lot of these smaller cities too, right? If you're going to Lawrence, Kansas, or Auburn, Alabama, or Lexington, Kentucky, or Columbia, Missouri, or wherever you're going, not the easiest places to get to from anywhere, much less Toronto, and then you've got winter travel too. So you do want to leave yourself extra time. It's not like flying from Toronto to New York in June. And so a lot of times it's 2 flights and then a rental car, and you're driving 45 minutes or an hour or something like that. But it's all part of the job. And if it's a downside, it's one, it's not a huge downside. It's just, it is what it is. We all know what travel is like. So, but yeah, as I get older, I'm not going to lie, travel, it wears on you a little bit more. I used to be able to bounce back and forth between time zones effortlessly, and now I feel it a little bit more.
Now, how tough is it to adjust to different styles of your color commentators? To give an extreme example, say working with Jay Billis versus Dick Vitale.
Yeah, a good question and a valid question. And to me, here's another analogy. I made one in the last segment that we did. I look at myself as kind of the point guard of the crew. So my job is to move the ball around and get people good shots. My job is to put Jay in a spot that he's comfortable in, is to, let him tell us things that I don't know that he can educate us on. So it does take a little getting used to. Dick and Jay are as different as two analysts can be. And even with the Blue Jays, it's Buck for about 100 games and Joe Siddall for about 60 games. I don't think it's as hard if you make it a priority to make your analyst comfortable, to say the show's not about me, it's about the show. It's us putting the best television product on the air that we can. And that could be something I say, something Jay says, something our courtside reporter says. It could be a graphic or a replay or a shot our director gets. It's a team sport. And I think as long as a play-by-play announcer thinks of it as a team sport and makes it about the other people on the crew more than they make it about themselves, it doesn't take very much time. There have been a couple of times over the years where I've worked with people who I may just have met, like at dinner the night before. And I knew who they were and I had seen them on TV, but we've never worked together before. The dinner the night before can be very helpful too, because they'll say things, or you just get a feel for their cadence, their timing, their sense of humor, whatever it is. And that can help a little bit as well.
Yeah, I love that point guard example. And unfortunately, I think nowadays, I look at you as like an old school point guard. Nowadays, you have a lot of shooting point guards.
Right, I try to be a pass first point guard.
Yeah, exactly. I keep telling Evan that, but it's a tough go.
Yeah, absolutely. I love college sport. I just think it's so much better than professional sport, to be honest. The passion's there and kids are going for it and they're trying to make it. But like you always hear, everyone's always worried about the safety of the players in these games. It's so crazy with the atmospheres that are there. But you ever felt nervous or unsafe if there's a court storming going on?
Maybe once or twice. We had one. I had a game at North Carolina State, and if they stormed the court, that must have mean they beat Duke or Carolina. I don't remember. I think it was Duke. This is a long time ago, 13, 14 years ago. And they stormed the court, but they kind of stormed from the corners, so it wasn't really near me. But Indiana, which I mentioned before, they were coming from every angle. And I did a game in 2012, I believe it was, where they beat number 1 Kentucky, undefeated number 1 Kentucky. And it felt a little nerve-wracking. But I think the Indiana folks know that, because I believe it's the only place, just where the table is situated and where the students are situated, where typically there are a couple of like security people or actually police officers just in that general area. So they were standing right behind, I was with Vitale, they were standing right behind me and Dick. So the students kind of had to go around, but it felt like we were on this tiny, tiny little island, and the waves were crashing all around us. So I would never say unsafe. There was one where Doris Burke was our sideline reporter. We were at Charlotte and they beat Louisville. This is a long time ago, I bet you 20 years ago. And I was worried for her because she was out on the court trying to interview a coach or a player, and it can get dangerous out there. I'm sitting at a table in a chair, and I think, and you know, there are other, whether it's ticket holders or media members or the scores table, there are other kind of official looking chairs and desks there, and hopefully, you know, the students have enough common sense to try to avoid those. But the most worried I ever was for Doris at Charlotte when she was out in the middle of it trying to interview a coach. And fortunately, she was okay.
There was, I think, that old clip of, was it Tom Mees on ESPN, where he's like elbowing people out of the way.
Was that a football game?
I think it was a football game.
So it can get a little crazy out there. So, but never anything really scary, more just kind of get caught up in the moment and like, wow, look at what I'm seeing here. Look at how much this matters to people.
Yeah. Now, how do you handle a game that turns into a blowout or just ends up being not as exciting as you thought or were hoping it would be?
Yeah. I mean, a basketball game, it'll happen, but again, the game still moves fairly quickly. You have more time to fill in a baseball game when it gets out of hand. But there are always things, there are always background stories to tell. Like if I come into a basketball game, I'll just make it up. Let's say I have 60 bits of information on my notes. I'm never using anywhere near 60. I'm lucky if I'm getting half of them in. In the blowout game, you start digging a little bit deeper and you give a little more background on this guy, or he played against that guy, or here's how that coach recruited him. You look ahead at the team's upcoming schedules. You might go back to the studio for a couple more updates if there are good games going on elsewhere. It still moves pretty quickly. So yeah, it's always more exciting when the game is great. I mentioned the Florida-Kentucky game that I had a few days ago as we speak here in January, and it was one of the top 5 games I've ever been lucky enough to call. It was 106-100 in an incredible environment. So that was the opposite, where you didn't want it to end. But if a blowout happens, there, you know, say it's me and Jay Billis, you know, we both follow enough other teams and leagues around the sport, obviously, that we can look ahead. Hey, on Tuesday, Alabama's got a big game coming up, and Nate Oates' team, you know, and then he'll answer me, and then and I might say, you know, how do you view them at the top of the SEC? Do you think they're better than Auburn? How good is Tennessee? And you know, that's where the research pays off. You don't need it in the great games. You need it more in the games that aren't great.
All right, so I know this is extremely early to be asking this, but I would not be doing myself any justice if I didn't try to get an upper hand on my buddies in my bracket pool. But, what teams have impressed you so far? I'm writing this down, by the way.
Oh no, you can ask Ben. You don't want my picks.
Oh, I still want to hear it. What teams that have impressed you so far, and then give us your bold prediction on who's going to win the 2025 men's NCAA title.
So it's January 7th as we are speaking. I got to say that out loud.
I'll take anything. I'll take anything.
Yeah. The 2 best teams I have seen are Auburn and Alabama. They haven't played each other yet. They will twice. I haven't seen Alabama in person yet. I've seen them on TV a number of times. I've had Auburn a number of times already in person. Those are the 2 best teams. I think Iowa State is great and tough and together, and they could go a long way. Tennessee is really, really good too. Connecticut is much better than they were when I saw them in Maui at the end of November, and they're going to make some noise. But I would put Auburn and Alabama as my top 2 ahead of the field. And if I had to pick one, I think it would be Alabama. Their depth is extraordinary. But those 2 teams are so, so good. I don't know if I'm on Auburn-Alabama games coming up. I haven't looked that far ahead. We haven't been scheduled that far ahead, but I know I have each of them coming up against other schools. So, but those 2 are just a touch above for me, and I would put Alabama a teeny tiny bit ahead of Auburn.
That still seems so odd to me to have football schools like Alabama and Auburn right at the top. It's amazing. Now, how are the fans of those teams basketball-wise?
They're great. So Auburn built a new building about 5 years ago. Maybe it's more than that now. And Bruce Pearl is as good a coach in America in a couple of ways. First of all, he's as good a coach as there is in America. And second of all, in terms of rallying support and the students, and it's a scene, and it's fantastic there. Alabama's very, very good as well. Auburn has a newer, smaller arena where they just feel they're right on top of you all the time. It's a newer arena. So I think the Auburn experience is a little bit above the Alabama experience. But the SEC, which, as you said, I mean, it's a football league. Tennessee is fantastic. As we sit here, they're ranked #1 in the nation. Florida is great. I've been to Arkansas a few times in recent years, and I don't think they're great this year, but the Arkansas experience is as noisy as any experience that I encounter across America. And I haven't been to places like Ole Miss and Mississippi State in a long time, but they're really good. And the SEC has brought in some unbelievable coaches, great coaches, and it's transformed the league. And as we sit here right now, I think 5 of the top 10 are SEC programs, and 10 or 9 of the top 25 are SEC programs. It's historic what's going on right now, and it is a football league. But boy, oh boy, basketball is certainly making a very loud statement this year in the SEC.
Bruce Pearl, Springfield, Mass, I believe.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah.
All right. Well, to wrap things up here, where do you see yourself 20 years from now? Still announcing?
Oh no, I'm 57 years old. If you had said 10, I would say, yeah, I can see that. Not 20. 20 years old. I think I will watch all of Ben's games. And I'm not a grandfather yet, but I'm quite sure I'll be a grandfather to some degree. By then, I will be doing nice long walks, spending time with my wife, being a grandfather, and watching sports on TV 20 years from now. 10 years, I might still be working, but at 77, I'm not one of those guys.
Because we do have an open screen for you if you want to join. Or Evan could take a nice hiatus or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, people have been asking for it.
Well, I'll leave you with this. I was reading an article on you in the New York Times and The Athletic, and in the reader comments section, someone wrote, Dan was the voice of my childhood. And I think for an announcer, we've sort of all had that feeling, and to now be that guy that people feel that way about, it's got to be a blessing and a burden, but pretty neat kind of thing.
It is nice. It makes me feel nice and warm. It also makes me feel a little bit old to hear that. But again, the number is the number. So it doesn't feel, when I say out loud, I've been doing this 30 years, it's like an out-of-body experience to say that. But I've been tremendously lucky. I'm tremendously lucky on a number of fronts. One of them is, again, born and raised in Toronto, that I'm calling games for my hometown team. I live in my hometown. That's not a lot of people in this business get a chance to do that. It's very nice to hear. I do have younger fans, like people in their 20s or whatever, come up to me at the Rogers Center sometimes and say, my dad and I have been watching you, or whatever, things like that. And it's nice. I just got into the business to have fun, to be honest with you, because I didn't think I was going to enjoy 40 years as an actuary. No disrespect to the profession. I just didn't think it was for me. I got into it to have a good time. And whatever my dreams were back then, I'm very fortunate because I was lucky enough to surpass them, and I've had some wonderful experiences. And now to see Ben doing it allows me to enjoy it through a different lens as well. So I've been very lucky. I really have.
Well, he is Dan Shulman, play-by-play announcer for the Toronto Blue Jays, as well as lead college basketball play-by-play man for ESPN. Dan, Evan and I are both sports fanatics and TV sports junkies, and we really both feel you're as good as it gets when it comes to play-by-play announcers, and we're really honored that you gave us the time to come on the show.
My pleasure. Just don't throw it back at me when Auburn and Alabama get knocked out in the second round.
Oh, that's locked in now.
All right. Thanks, guys. I enjoyed it. Be well.
Thanks a lot. You're watching Mc&T's Sports Report on CHCO-TV, and we'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to Mc&T's Sports Report. And Evan, how good was Dan Shulman?
He's the best, man. He's the voice of college basketball now. It's unreal. But we're not allowed to. We can't close the episode without mentioning a picture with you and Big John Mellencamp there, can we?
Okay, well, that's it for episode 80 of Mc&T Sports Report. I am Joe in New Haven.
And I'm Evan here in St. Andrews.
Thanks to Patrick Watt and Florence Mitchell for producing and editing a show that's more addictive than that little ditty about Jack and Diane. Yeah, you could see that joke coming right down Water Street. All right, well, this is Mc&T Sports Report on CHCO-TV in St. Andrews, and thanks for watching.